How you all doing? My name is Victor Sims, uh, and I'm excited to talk to you all about how to put social back into social services. My background, a little bit, is I grew up in the state foster care system. I spent almost 12 years in the foster care system prior to my adoption. I then went into advocacy for foster care, youth rights, educational rights, and all of that kind of great stuff. And then I had the opportunity to, now work in social services as a case manager, supervisor here at Cell Future, which is an awesome opportunity. So I've been in the field working now for almost 5 years, which is crazy to think about. And so one of my passions has been strongly within probably like the last year and a half, has been truly understanding the social capital or the lack of social capital thereof with our children and our families that we interact with. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, ways that I have found best to truly engage and empower our families. So part of it is understanding, like I said, how we partner with our youth, um, understanding their narrative, um, finding ways to help to draft that narrative with that youth. One of the terms that, as I was an advocate, that we talked about a lot as a former youth with lived experience is nothing about us without us. Oftentimes, we do a lot of meetings that are revolved around the child that we don't invite them to. And so their voice isn't at the table, their experience isn't at the table, and their insight isn't at the table. Um, I remember one time when I was working at Children's Home Society in Lakeland, I invited this youth to basically his permanency staffing. He's 17 years old. His goal is APLA. And, typically, we're all professionals just sitting around the table talking about how we're going to, make sure that this youth transitions into adulthood as successful as possible. Um, and in our heads, we think we're, putting all of it together. And so I get to the meeting and I tell them, I was like, oh, I invited the youth, and I guess I should have told them that ahead of time. But I told them, I invited the youth, and I told the youth to invite anybody that they find necessary to basically be a part of his team. I understood at that time, social capital is defined by who the child believes is socially there for them, not just who we believe is there. Because at the end of the day, when our cases close out, the agency is no longer attached to that child or that youth. It's those people who are going to be there that's going to be answering those calls late in the morning or late at night or early in the morning, or those people who are more likely to sign for an apartment or a car loan for them, and finding those true social capital. So I wanted to bring that to the table with this youth. And we get there, and the youth actually started venting with his mother. He invited his mother to the conversation, and she comes and she's talking about what she thinks his life should look like, and he truly like had a place, and I felt like he had true closure with like his experiences in the system of care. Mind you, he was in the system for 6 years before aging out, and so he he sat there and he basically told us basically all of the experiences that he went through in the system of care, how he felt about it, and um, basically like those efforts that he saw me make. And with teenagers, I'm very intentional on how I engage with their parents. Because to be honest with you, parents will say something to teenagers, and teenagers believe like it's you know 100% true. And so sometimes I am like, you know what, you're right. Let's call your mom and let's ask your mom together. And then we get there and we ask them, and the child is brought to that truth. And There was with this specific youth prior to this meeting. I mean, I tried everything I could, even getting creative, um, and he had so much dislike and so much hate for the system of care. And so I didn't want him to one leave that bad taste in his mouth, but also to like give him like true reality of like we're here to support him, and like if this is what you want, I'm going to show you I'm doing it, not just uh, behind the doors, those closed doors that we're always working behind, trying to like do the best we can for our children and our families. And so I called mom and I said, hey, um, your son wants to see you. I will pick you up early in the morning myself. I don't care what time it is, just to get you to see him. Um, and mom's like, well, I've got some things to do. I said, well, it's okay. You just tell me when, and like I will clear whatever is in that slot to make sure this happens. And she continued to make excuses. Mind you, the kid's sitting there, and uh, he said, no, no. And so he called her and tried to do the same thing. And mom's like, yeah, I don't know. Vic just hasn't talked to me. And he's like, no, I was there when he called you. And like being able to like show him like, one, we're there, fighting for him. And so I knew like engaging him was going to be part of that. I knew that if I really wanted to impact him and change the way that he saw the system of care and how we were really there to support him, that was one of those ways. And so the way I've tried to break down this specific training is breaking it down into multiple categories between the parents and the child, and truly diving down into those different ways. The first one that I'll be going over obviously is partnering with our youth. We oftentimes we quash their voices into what we believe is the voice of reasoning. We've lived X amount of years, so we know what your life should be and like what this is supposed to look like and stuff like that. And one thing that I've always told every person I've interacted in the system of care is like, I'm a professional, but I'm not a professional in your life. Like, I don't know what it means to be Jane Doe or John Doe. I know what it means to be a case manager. I know what my school taught me. I know what training taught me, but I don't know who you are, and I don't know your family. So I need you to help tell that story and tell me where you want to be. And so oftentimes, I get to hear those stories and break them down and understanding in a whole different light. And so we take those times to say that, no, we don't understand the full dynamics of what's going on in that home. And sometimes we have to realize that they do know more than we realize, especially our youth. Our youth can tell stories, 4 or 5 months in, and you're like, oh, well, this isn't why we're involved, but like that might have been the reason that we should have been involved. And understanding sometimes like how do we uplift their voices and make them feel like safe, and planning what it looks like to come home, or towards permanency. And then we realize that we're all doing it because at some point, we want it to truly change the world, and we get inundated sometimes with, bureaucracy within the system of care. Am I upset with the case manager? Am I upset with the caregiver? Am I upset with the guardian ad litem or attorney ad litem? Or sometimes, as a case manager, our own attorneys, and trying to like figure out how do we set aside all of our own personal judgments to uplift this child or this family. So I want everyone to take a time, and we're not going to share it, but to take some time just to think about a time that you had someone when you were younger that took that extra step, that went that extra mile for you. I'm gonna give you like 15 seconds, because 15 seconds is a long time, I realized. So now that you've put that person in your mind, like just think about all those people that came along with that person. Usually, you can have that, you know, pastor, and then all of a sudden you have all of those ministers and deacons and deaconesses that are attached to them, and think about how they've impacted you. One of the exercises I did whenever I would train new case managers I would have them follow one specific case, and I would put basically on that wall, the word case manager, because that's, my role. And then I would put each of the different things on that case that we like attached to, and like all of those different things that we do, whether it's that therapist, whether it's the school that we're contacting, whether it's the coach or the guardian ad litem, and like just go a full map to show them like beyond us, there's a full team. And I think sometimes, we forget that when we're truly thinking about our social engagement, it's engaging those people in unique ways. So prior to myself coming to Sell Future, I knew nothing about selling. Matter of fact, I actually didn't like water at all. And I remember my boss giving me a message on LinkedIn, actually, basically like, hey, you want to see this program? And mind you, I wasn't looking for a job. I was just, enjoying where I was at. And I had the opportunity to come see his vision, see how to make child welfare and in a sense disrupt the system of care from those typical norms. I've been able to see how Sell Future partners with children, and how we outline a different way that children get to see this world. Back in 2016, prior to me actually becoming a case manager, I was at a fundraiser for Children's Home Society, and I was speaking, and I usually like have these words that I put in front of me, and like I'm gonna say these words, and then you get up there and you're like, oh, I don't want to say those words. Those are good, the day I wrote it. And so I get up there and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna say what's in my heart, and I just spoke. And one of the things that like captured me that specific day was, for so long I wanted to change the world, and then I realized the world is really a perspective based off of the person looking at it. And so on that stage, I said, I don't want to change the world. I want to change the way that children see this world. Because if I can change the way that they see the world, then like that means we're doing it a little better. And so I had the opportunity to come to Sell Future and truly see how we can do child welfare differently, how we can engage on a different level. One of the other things that I've realized through my own experience of living in the system of care is trauma hasn't always been healed in an office. It's healed through those connections, and it's healed through those relationships that are built around us. Sometimes we talk about how trauma can be healed beyond our office, and how that trauma is healed through those connections and those relationships. One of the opportunities that I've had specifically is one of our youth who, all of our youth are deemed high risk, but one of our youth who was deemed high risk and was in a placement that like, I believe like could get her towards permanency. And I was able to have conversations. I mean, I'm obviously not a clinical therapist or anything like that. So I was able to have conversations that were pretty deep that talked about those fears of being adopted, and have those conversations with her. Because oftentimes we're trying to find ways to put ourselves and have empathy for the people we serve. And so I had an opportunity to take her out on the water and engage with her. And most of the kids that I tried to take out on the water as the supervisor was the ones who, to be honest, like had life experiences as me, who were facing adoption and wanted to be adopted, but also like wanted to still remain that foster child. And I know it's a crazy thing to believe and think, but it's something that so foster care, like what it means to go home to home and all that kind of stuff, and in a sense you get used to it. And so I had an opportunity to truly engage with her and have those tough conversations. But one of the things I realized, most of those tough conversations weren't really happening on the water as much as I thought they were. It was happening in the car. It was happening at a McDonald's. It was happening at some chicken place that she liked. Like it was those different things that like truly helped me engage with her on a higher level. Oops. Oh, this dual screen thing. Let's go back to this one. So partnering begins with comfort. One of my favorite things about my experience in the system of care actually was the amount of trips that my case manager took me, actually just about everybody took me to McDonald's. I don't know what it is, but everybody's always quick to say, you want to go get some McDonald's? One, it's an easy way to get like a youth to comply. Um, is put some food. I mean, you do the same thing with adults. I do it with my team. I want you to do something. We're gonna have some food here. We're gonna bring some pizza. But um, the story of McDonald's is I was a pretty difficult youth in foster care. Nowhere near as like the level as some of the teenagers in the system of care now, I believe. But in my time, I was probably top notch. And so I gave a case manager all the time the best I can, like a run for their money. And so, I mean, I made sure like they were always a part of the overtime crew, as some of our kids call it, um, because I was going to, in a sense, get what I believe I wanted. And so I tried to create empowerment within myself and innovative ways to get what I wanted. So whenever I would change placements, I would tell her, I'm not going to eat for the next 3 days. I'm going to starve myself. And I think the first time she thought I was kidding. And so I sat there and I was like, no, I'm not going to eat. Like, I told her I wasn't going to eat. I told her I didn't want to come here. I told her there was nothing wrong with the last place I was at. And so um, she would actually drive to my placement every day for the first 3 days because she was like, no, you're gonna eat. Ain't nobody gonna say like you haven't ate and all this kind of stuff. And for me, like it showed me that she was gonna show up. As it got older, no, I still kept doing it. I was gonna say I stopped doing it, but I actually didn't. I stopped doing it after I got adopted. But in my head, I thought like that was my way to get what I wanted. Like I wanted some kind of like sense of like consistency, and for me McDonald's was that consistent thing. Like when things were going bad, like I needed like McDonald's to be there. Like, and I think that's why we get in that habit of bringing that comfort food when we're in between placement. I had a youth specifically um, who, God help us, I mean he could have made me quit 10 times in one day. And he I probably had the most drive time, windshield time with this youth. Um, and we drive to Miami, we drive to Tallahassee because like placements just like he just loved disrupting placements is what I like is what I said. Like it's like he just does it because he wants to see me before those 21 days. And so he's gonna get disrupted as soon as possible. And so I would drive and I'd be like, you know what, we're gonna go to Wendy's because I know that's where he wants to go. And I know what he's gonna order. And like I knew it like to the back of my hand. And the funny thing is actually whenever I did a lot of my case transfer staffings, I actually like identified those things on the case transfer staffings because oftentimes we're stuck in the, where's the case at? How's the family doing? And I'm like, well, this is the way this youth does well. Like you go and take this youth to X, Y, and Z, like they're gonna do well. So you're not having a good day. The kid gets in trouble at school. Take him to Wendy's. He's gonna order a 6-piece chicken nugget. He's gonna have ketchup with it, and he's gonna get some Sprite. This is how it's gonna work every single time. He's gonna sit at the menu and pretend like he doesn't know what to order, but I can tell you, all you need is $7.62. Like he will be okay. And I think that's how we truly like individualize even case transfer staffings, is taking that next step. And I, I think a lot of times like we don't realize how much we can connect with a child on a car ride. Most of my like biggest social impacts that I think I've had on any cases has been on car rides with a youth. One, because I'm not staring at them like, hey, why are you doing this? And mind you, you're aggravated. So sometimes you just want to say, Lord help us. And interacting with kids on car rides has been probably the largest impact that I've been able to address things with children, and a lot of that kind of stuff. Sibling visitations. I've always been intentional to ensure that I always did also sibling visitations without the parent there. Oftentimes we're quick to do those sibling visitations and parent visitations and count them as one thing. I think the way that siblings interact in a natural state of mind is different than whenever a parent's around. And being able to like for them to truly engage them when they're not placed together, like the way that they want to engage without like their parent being there. Them also sibling visitations, you can also get a lot of insight about things that happen in that home because they're not going to probably discuss it while mom's there, or mom's going to be quick to like give them that stare to shut it down before it gets into that like weird area. And so I've been able to truly engage and bring different social experiences with children that are in the system through doing that. Ways that I've changed car rides is one youth specifically, actually one youth that we have in our current program. He enjoyed leaving school early by getting in trouble at school. He probably had the best attendance, but never made it through the whole day. Matter of fact, 3 days out of the week, he probably didn't make it through half of the day. And so during some of those car rides, I learned like, let's, like try to get into those conversations and figure out like what's in his head and what's in his mind and like, what does that look like? And as trauma informed as we are, sometimes we do things based off of resources. I'm going to be very honest. The child welfare system isn't an attractive field to fund in legislation. Nobody wants to put money behind removing children. But I think part of that is how we language it, and I'll get into that a little later too. But with this specific child, I would get into the car with him, and I remember one of the longest rides we had that like he actually like did nothing wrong, and I can't actually remember where we were going, but I told him he could like choose the music and all that kind of stuff, and listen to the music that he was playing, and he put Michael Jackson. Like when I was younger, I used to think I was Michael Jackson's son, so I would try to hit a note and stuff like that, and pretend to do the he and all that kind of great stuff. And he played one of Michael Jackson's songs in the car, and I said, you know what? Let's just sing at the window, like at all the cars that are passing beside us. And at first he thought, Mr. Vic, you're crazy. And so I said, well, what you don't realize is I'm actually going to do it because I just said I'm going to do it now. And so we're passing cars and I'm like singing loudly, Michael Jackson, turn it all the way up just to make sure that they like look over and stuff like that. Because you get to those red lights, like it's always an interesting, like quiet, like time. And so you play that music loudly, people always look over. And so I'm looking over, I'm singing outside the window and he just busts out laughing. And so he started doing it too. The next time he got in the car, he wanted to do it again. I was like, oh no, that was just that day. Like that was just what I was feeling. But it became a routine with him. Like it was something like he like looked forward to. And so one of the times I took him home, I had one of our other youth with us. And so it was me, him, and another youth. And so I'm like, okay, this time we're probably not going to do it. And like I was looking forward to it that day, not gonna lie, because it just became part of like every interaction with us. And so this other kid gets in the car. He goes, no, Mr. Vic, he's cool. We're going to go sing outside the window. Wait till we get to a red light. And so sure as day, like he does it as if like this kid is in the car. Teenagers try to like seem cool all the time. So I just really didn't expect like him to like truly want to do it. And he gets there and he does it. And like the kid like behind us starts doing it. And I was like, huh. Like this is a thing. And so I was like, this is gonna be the new thing. Like when I transport kids, I'm gonna like be obnoxious and like show them like I'm a human being. And I think that's what we've lost within social services. We're good at like referring kids to therapy. We're good at referring kids to extracurricular activities, and all of those things do have a place in the life of a child. Don't get me wrong, but we're also there. And one thing that I've always told kids, especially our teenagers, is, you know what, it is okay to be mad at the system of care, but I don't know why you're mad at me, because all I'm doing is working here and I'm aggravated with you. I'm not the system of care. I work for the system of care, and trying to like remind them like that I'm a human being. I think so often we forget that, and we don't tap into that, and we don't also like share it with them and correct them uh, as quick as possible. So when they're upset with like the system, like, no, 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 you're not upset with me. You're upset with the lack of foster parents in the circuit. Like, I understand that you're upset that you're in a group home, and I wish that there were more foster parents too, man. You know what? I also wish that there were more foster parents that took teenagers. And like talking about like that frustration with the teenager that the story of McDonald's really reminded me of with the specific agency. One of the teens that like I wanted to push for adoption, one of the things I told her to truly change her behaviors and the way that she interacted with other people and even all of our teenagers is what I want to do is I want to change the way I talk about you. And I can't do that if you're doing X, Y, and Z. You know, I agree. Like, you should not be going to placement at 10:30 at night. However, last night you refused. 2 nights ago you stole a car. 2 months ago you did this. This doesn't look good. And so the more you do, the harder it gets, man. And so if this is what you want, I need to be able to show like we can do this. And so you tell me what you need. You know, the next time before you do this, you just give me a call. I don't care what time it is. And, you know, you work through it. And a lot of people say, I don't have a good work-life balance. Don't get me wrong, I probably don't. But let's be honest, all of us really don't. You know, we say we're gonna put our phones to the side, we're gonna do this, we're gonna turn this off, and the days we don't have our phones, we still check our email 3 or 4 times that day on that weekend. And we're guilty of it. But sometimes we're not doing that true engagement and being there in those time periods when it's needed most in the beginning.
I am a beacon of hope because I grew up in the foster care system for almost 12 years, away from family, changing homes, and different environments. I'm a beacon of hope because my voice is heard. I speak up for children all across the country and share my story. The beacon of hope, to me, is everything.
So, for all the child welfare professionals on this call, I actually don't think I'd be in this field if it weren't for people like you all. Matter of fact, I know I wouldn't. I mean, that story of that McDonald's, you know, my case manager, like driving every day, like as aggravating as like we seem during that time period, like we're looking and we're evaluating and we're assessing. And as we get older, we want to be just like you all. And I say that with like all my heart. But that's because like I had someone that was willing to engage, willing to be social, and truly willing to be a human. I mean, she talked about her own family. She talked about all those things that like oftentimes, you know, because we're professionals, we don't share our personal lives. But, you know, I remember that like when she was about to get married and all of that kind of great stuff, because like she was willing to share that with me. Once she knew so much about me, so it made me feel safer whenever I knew a little bit about her. And so I thank all of you for that. One of the things that one of the youth I served said was, you were friendly and fun to be around, and you made us forget that you were there because of the situation that we were in. I was about to say situation that you were in. And so I think that's always been my goal, is to do that. As long as we're pushing systems in front of them, they're going to remember that they're in it. They're going to remember like that they're removed. And yes, they're not sleeping with mom. And yes, they're not, you know, sleeping in the same house as dad and stuff like that. But we can still make them seem like as traditional as possible, as traditional children. And oftentimes with our teenagers specifically, we miscategorize it. We say we don't understand why they're doing it, and we don't understand why they're doing X, Y, and Z. But the fact of the matter is they're a teenager. And then they're a teenager with trauma. And so you put both of those together, it does not equal anything really, really, really attractive. And so trying to push that through, and even with the way that we work with um, the people who provide resources to our resource homes, whether it's a caregiver or whether it's a foster home or a group home, like having those conversations, like when they think they're going to disrupt a child. And I say think because most times I'm like, no, this is not a reason to disrupt. The kid did not murder anybody, so we are okay. Because at the end of the day, like we wouldn't do this to our own child. And so oftentimes I'm like, no. What we're not going to do is disrupt this child because they stole a car. No, nope, that's not a good idea. This kid would have learned how to drive if they weren't in foster care. And so what we need to be doing is trying to get them a permit so that way they don't have to steal a car and we can just teach them how to drive the car. You know, oh, they stole your money? Well, it sounds like they need to get a job. So, you know, trying to like truly like look at like those typical teenage experiences and what our children are doing in the system of care. Our children have so many people that they ask things to, and they don't know who to ask sometimes. Some things they ask the guardian ad litem, and I'm like, no, you should have asked me to do that. And some things they ask me, I'm like, no. Then the guardian ad litem can get you a clothing voucher in like probably a week. It's going to take me about 3 months to even get approval for it. So you might want to go towards that guardian ad litem route and like truly like do that. And so I think oftentimes like we're not telling them because we're worried more about permanency, and sometimes permanency involves stabilizing them. I'm a huge believer with our teenagers. When our teenagers start getting this freedom in our system of care, sometimes our parents get a little excited and say, well, you know what? Y'all can't handle them. Like, I got unsupervised visits now. There's no need for me to go do any more than what I've done because I'm okay with unsupervised visits. And I don't got to feed them. I can still see them and all this kind of great stuff. And so whenever youth act out in the system of care, I always like, you know, your child did this, but this is how they fix that problem. So that way the parent doesn't believe like that they can also handle it. And so some of our lockout youth, you know, youth that don't get picked up from DJJ or Baker Act, like we get stuck in that system of, yeah, they just did this and they just did this and they just did that we forget, like, you know, but like, I realize, you know, if I give this kid a pickle and say, you know what, if you do good today, I will give you a pickle. Like all of a sudden, like that child is like focused on like trying to get that pickle, that they're more intentional about their behaviors. And so, and legit, that's what I did with one of our kids, and like don't know why it worked, but like he loves pickles, so I always did it. And that's how we truly engaged with him. Partnering with our parents. I saved this one for the end because it's sometimes a little bit more difficult. Families in which become candidates to become partners with our system of care are usually facing more barriers to unlocking their human potential than the maltreatment that's before us. I believe wholeheartedly, and I understand that poverty and trauma in the child welfare system, they affect the capability of an individual and what they believe that they can do. Sometimes when we look at our parents, we've got a glimpse of sometimes just an hour of their life that has changed and uprooted their whole life, and what they saw as norm. It's a sad thing, and I don't know. Sometimes it's a hard part, but the way I've done it, I've been very successful at reunifications throughout my time in child welfare, and the reason why is I've taken an approach to really do whatever is necessary to achieve the results that I want, and I believe that are attainable. I believe that as long as I believe like the family can be reunified, that like they can be reunified, and I think that's something I've always believed. So once again, this is one of my favorite slides, and I'm very intentional with words. My staff would tell you like the words that are used bother me, and if we don't use the words correctly, it'll it affects the way that we communicate with others. And so I believe it starts in our language. Oftentimes, when we're evaluating the reason why families have become involved, we say, what went wrong here? And we've got this huge list of what went wrong, but we don't look at what went right. A parent that's taking care of a child till the age of 11, and all of a sudden the child's come into the system of care, they've done something pretty good, to where people around them didn't believe like they needed our services. Specifically in Florida, I think a large reason for people getting in our system of care is lack of knowing the resources around them. A lot of the families, and we all can think of those families on our load or that we've interacted with, that have relocated from another state. And I think that says a lot. I think when people relocate to Florida, sometimes they're doing it because they think it's the best thing that they can do for themselves, and they don't realize sometimes how hard it is to get started when moving, and in their head it all makes sense. And so looking at what went right, diversion versus preservation. I know everywhere we're quick to name our programs diversion programs, but diversion it's really a negative term. It's the idea that something wrong is going to happen. Preservation is looking at those things that go right. And so when we're looking at diversion, we're trying to like minimize the things that are going wrong compared to like uplift those things that are going right. So what does that look like? It looks different. And then child welfare versus child well-being. Welfare is another negative connotation. And so when we're thinking about like, why did this parent reach out, or why did this parent do this, and why did this parent do that? Well, people try not to be associated with the welfare system as much as possible. And so even like saying child well-being has a better outlook. And even oftentimes when we're talking about a lot of stuff, we use child, and we forget the family and the full family unit. Excuse me. And so sometimes we spend so much time focusing on those on the child's trauma that we forget the trauma that the parent may have had. And that brings me to the next slide. Reunification when it's hard. When a parent's incarcerated, those are sometimes the hardest ones. One, because each jail has different services they offer, but also trying to find ways to be creative. I remember one of the families I had in Polk, I promised this provider stuff I really honestly probably couldn't promise them, but I said, look, I will figure out a way to pay you for going in that jail, but this parent needs this, and they're going to get out in 3 months, and I need this stuff completed. So when they get out, all we have to focus on is them getting a job and getting stabilized and all this kind of great stuff. And so I did all my rah-rah, and eventually I got a provider that said yes. And so they went in that jail and all that kind of great stuff. One of the things I do whenever I first meet with parents is I do a meeting of life, and then I do a meeting of hope. I separate them into 2 different meetings intentionally. And I do that all within the first week of interacting with them. That first week when they switch over to services is a lot. A lot of times, we can't explain the whole process to them in that whole week. Let's be honest. We can't answer all their questions because we really don't know what's going on either. And we're trying to assess that and figure out what that looks like. So the meeting of life, I scheduled this meeting to put myself in their shoes. I scheduled this meeting to explain sometimes that sometimes these events make us a little stronger. And I also tell them to look beyond I do this meeting to look beyond the direct maltreatment. And what that specifically means is I try to understand a little bit more of the parents' upbringing, and truly understand it without like prying too much, but like prying a lot. One of my favorite things working in child welfare is I think I'm an investigator, and I can get everything I want, and ask all the things I want and stuff like that. But oftentimes, like a parent has never really told their story to anyone. I remember one of the cases I had in Orlando. I met with this parent, and she was probably the hardest person to meet with. And I got to meet with her finally. And we met and we sat and we talked, and she talked for like 2.5 hours straight about, her upbringing and like everything like that. And when we did the case transfer staffing, she had extreme domestic violence. She had staples in her head, and like they asked her, do you think that you need domestic violence awareness courses? And she said, no. Every couple goes through this. And I said, oh, hell. And it just came right out my mouth. And I felt so bad because like at that moment, like she realized like I judged her based off of like what she just said. And so I think that made it harder for me to have those follow-up meetings, because I just said like in a full-on professional staffing, oh hell, when she said that she that was normal to her. And so when we sat down and we talked, I spent a whole bunch of time just saying, tell me about those things that went right. Tell me about, those things that you enjoyed doing with your child. Like, tell me about those good moments, because I know about one bad moment. So I want to know about those good moments. And when they're talking about, that life and all that kind of stuff, and they're saying, movies and all this kind of stuff that they watched and the games that they played, or, walking down the street and all that kind of great stuff, and just remembering it, and them being able to say it and like talk about it, like when it changes like the way like everything I've read about them, because oftentimes we're quick to like run towards like fixing that maltreatment, that we don't really get to hear their story and connect with them and let them believe like we do believe like they can be a good parent, and that what happened isn't a result of who they are or how they parent, but sometimes the circumstance that they're in. And so that meeting, I truly try to take off everything that I think is normal and just listen. And so with that specific mom, her parents were in a domestic violence relationship. And so that's what she saw. And then even when they separated, they still both were in domestic violence relationships. So like all three of the relationships she saw around her family, like were domestic violence. And so like, then I'm like sitting there, I'm like, okay, so this is what like she thinks a family, like how family like typically operates. How do I break that down for her and like understand like maybe it's not like domestic violence awareness, it's like understanding her self-worth, like understanding like what does a healthy relationship look like and stuff like that. And oftentimes like I was able to create case plans with like parents' own words. And so tell me about this, tell me about this. And I realized I had low self-esteem when I was in high school, and like, oh, so, okay, so you had low self-esteem. Okay. So, we actually can do some services on that, and we could, give you individual counseling and address that low self-esteem. And so now they're like, oh, y'all can do that? And I didn't have to fight them, and like understanding like why they need like this service in order to get their child back, because they truly like were a part of that like planning. And then explaining sometimes life makes us stronger. A lot of our parents, they had their kids when they were pretty young, or they had their first child when they were pretty young. And so I tell them like, hey, this is your time to like be a little selfish and figure out all those things that you need to do to be the best parent you can be. It was like, foster care is always meant to be temporary. It's not something long-term. I was like, one way or another, the child's got to leave the system of care. My goal is that they come back to you. And like truly like reminded them like, my goal is for the child to go back to you. And letting them understand like this is the time to like take all those things and do those things that you want to do. Like you said, prior to having your kids, you wanted to get a GED. Well, let's find a GED course for you to get into. We'll put that as a qualifying thing on your case plan, like in school or at work. Like, I just need you to be doing something to like show that, you know, stability, like that you want to do better and want to do more. And so being able to do that, and then put myself in their shoes. When I like listen to like what parents say, like I don't bring paper, and I do it intentionally. I mean, I do that at home visits too. Most when I was a case manager, I tried not to bring paper. I tried to make sure like that they saw me, and they didn't see my job. And so I would let them talk as much as possible and like engage and share that story and let them know like I'm not doing it just because I'm going to do this family assessment, but because I'm truly trying to understand like how you were raised and the experiences that you went through and what your family relationship looked like and how do we uplift that for something better. And then the other meeting is the meeting of hope. I scheduled this meeting to let them know that when we're in this together. I'm very clear on the language I use. Once again, with even this, I say we a lot. I don't say you need to do this. And I think that gives them that empowerment that when they're not alone, because let's be real, most of our circuits and most of the areas we work in or states we work in don't have true parent support groups. And I think that's one way that we can improve the system of care is parent support groups, parent advocacy groups, parent mentors and stuff like that. But that's a whole nother conversation. And so to let them know that we're in this together, because when a parent believes like they're not doing it by themselves, like they're more likely to achieve that success. And I largely believe that. And so I use a lot of we language during this meeting. And so we need to get in individual counseling, and we need to get in BIP, and we need to get in domestic violence, and we need to do this. And I do that because like it gives them that empowerment that like I don't like you is also another like sense of victim shaming for them, and that they feel like there's something wrong with them and there's something broken with them. And so when I say we, like I do that because when their success is my success. Like child welfare is all about strengthening families, and you know the sad statistic is more than half of our children won't go back home with their parents. And it's sad, and I think it starts with how we do it in the beginning. I think it starts with how we engage with them. I think it's how we motivate them. If we don't seem like we're part of their team, they don't think they need us. And then when they're out there trying to do it on their own and trying to like understand it, like that's not it. And so even whenever our parents are in that pre-contemplation stance, I'm like, no, we need it. We need to get an individual counseling. Like we need to do this soon. Like when do you have time to call us so we can set up this appointment? Because I always tell people, like, if I ever like had a TPR trial, like I knew I gave every effort I gave. Like I called with that parent, I emailed that parent the referral, I mailed them the referral, I called them, and I did more than that paper. And I tried to like contact the provider myself, and I tried to do it with them on 3-way, and I tried to like drive them to that to that appointment. And I know oftentimes in this field, like we're quick to say like, oh no, we're not driving that parent. I will drive the child, but I will not drive that parent. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know why we say it and why we do it. But I've always been a huge believer of like, if the case is going to move, it's going to take me like getting out of like the office. One thing I was told when I first became a supervisor is you can't manage safety from an office. And you can't assess safety from an office. And that's the way like I led my teams. And it was I think it's been probably really true for the most part for me, is how do I provide services past those norms. Like I'd be quick to say, hey, can we get mom an Uber gift card? Like I don't care what we have to get her, but like mom riding a bus for 3 hours, like I wouldn't want to ride a bus for 3 hours to get to this appointment either, because mom also believes at this point like she doesn't need to be in here. Like she doesn't, like her kid didn't need to be removed. Dad believes his kid didn't need to be removed. And so me saying you need to do this so that you need to be in a car for 2 or 3 hours, a bus for 2 or 3 hours to get there, like may not be the answer to get them involved in the beginning. And so we've got a lot of disparities, and I think I know COVID has like shifted up our world, but I think COVID has like allowed us to like truly engage parents on a whole nother level. Parents are going to court because it's easier to get to, because it's virtual. I mean, we have parents that we haven't talked to since the case basically opened that are like showing up at court, and then they're talking about all these barriers that they had, and they're like, no, I'm enrolled in this now because like they're doing it virtually and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, well, maybe we've been doing part of this wrong, you know? Maybe like the way like I know people are like talking about like they can't wait to get back to normal, but I hope part of normal includes like some of the ways that we've gotten innovative through this time of COVID. Um, and COVID has truly like brought child welfare to be innovative. I mean, telehealth has expanded. Children aren't waiting for services as long. Parents aren't waiting for services as long because now, you know what? We'll do this telehealth. We'll do this telehealth. And we're doing everything virtually. And I think that's amazing. It has its downfalls, don't get me wrong, but like, I think when we're talking about true engagement, like we're able to do it at a higher level. Even my parents, who were hard to meet with whenever I was first a case manager in Polk County, I loved Google Hangouts, and I'd be like, no, we can Google Hangout. Like, I want to see you. Like, I don't want to just talk to you on the phone, so I want to see you. And so we do this Google Hangout, and we talk, and like, okay, so this is what you need me to do, Jane. Okay, Jane, this is where we're gonna go, and we'll do this. I'll meet you at the railroad tracks, because you still don't want me to see your house for some reason. Okay, well, I'll meet you at these railroad tracks, and I hope I'm at the right railroad tracks. And it was cool and all that, but like part of that was because one, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a millennial, so like I love technology, and so I would try to integrate technology to everything. But to see like child welfare be pushed towards the 21st century, and modernizing child welfare, I mean, we're able to see it when we have changed the way we do home visit apps, and we're able to do it on our phones now and stuff like that. Like I think that's a way that we continue to move forward, and I think we've got to get past just pushing paperwork, and truly doing social work. Paperwork's easy. I mean, I can get a TPR on probably any family by sending paperwork on a consistent basis. I mean, I know how to do algorithms to send a referral out every month on my email without even actually having to like remember to send the referral out to that mom. So I scheduled send that email when I first got that case, and I knew on the first of the month, all my parents were getting referrals in their emails. And so it was just a way that I like did it, but like I also like tried to follow up and like truly engage with them and say, okay, I did the part that my job says I need to do, and making sure I sent that referral. But now I need to do like that true engagement. And I think we spend so much time on that paperwork and remembering to do that paperwork and stuff like that. And I think COVID has truly helped us get innovative. And I know oftentimes we've been talking about how do we make child welfare more innovative and how do we move child welfare forward and all that kind of great stuff. And I hate to say it, I think COVID has helped us do it. I think it's had its benefit. I mean, let's be honest, like we wouldn't have been doing this over Zoom. And so we've also been able to provide a better access to even webinars and trainings across the state of Florida because of this. We've done pre-service online. And I'm waiting for them to figure out how to do it in Canvas because I'm like, I don't know why we're not doing it as if it's like a course at an online university, and providing more services like in the field. Training, I'm gonna be as nice as possible with this, but like pre-service isn't the answer for like solving social work. It'll never be the answer. The answer to providing true social work is like trainers in the field that are there to truly like, hey, this is how I do it. I mean, we require people to have bachelors to be case managers or investigators or any of those positions. And so I don't think pre-service is going to be that answer. I think it's going to be showing people how to engage past their intellect. I think that's how we change child welfare is we look at ways that we're doing the same thing and figure out how to do it at a cheaper cost so that way we can provide more money towards direct services. Whether it's training our workers, whether it's being able to let lead case managers be lead case managers, and not just have a title because, you know, they made it past that year mark. And we want them to feel like, you know, they've got another step, but that they can be true mentors. And I think that's how we stop that back gate of people quitting at a high rate in the system of care. I mean, is find ways that we can provide more funding towards engaging with families. We spend too long in pre-service. And then highlighting those things that they've done right. I'm a huge believer of that. I mean, somehow parents have figured out how to feed their child. They have figured out how to make sure their child had somewhere to stay. It may not have been the cleanest place. It may not be a place I would ever want to live in, but they figured it out, and they figured it out with limited to no resources. And so reminding them, like, yes, you're right. You're a single father and you've been doing this on your own for 2 years. You're doing something right, sir. And I thank you for that. We want to get back to what you were doing and make it even better. How do we get back to that, sir? And so having those conversations, and then the hardest part has usually passed is what I remind them in the meeting of hope. Like, the hardest part is having your child removed. Everything from there makes it a little easier because, you know, now we're working towards progress on getting them back. And that is the conclusion of that. And if you'll have any questions, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the chats because it's a little harder to work with the screen.
Victor, I had one. You touched on it a little bit, but what are some changes that you have seen in the system that relate to better engagement? So you've talked about actually the opportunities that we've had with, you know,
yes.
this unexpected, you know, benefit that we've encountered. But so what are maybe some areas that need development? You touched upon that with pre-service training, but, you know, can you give us maybe one more nugget out of your experience?
I sure can. Circuit, forgive me, it's either Circuit 9 or Circuit 10, whatever Orlando is. They're doing something really cool with parent engagement case managers. I think that's really unique. And the model is pretty cool. So what they've realized is we've got case managers that are really good with parents, or they're really good with kids. And I think that's how we, I think that's a cool way forward. I would love to see how their permanency numbers result with it. And so the parent engagement specialist is assigned in the beginning of the case. And they work through as much as possible, and then they still have another case manager. So obviously they don't have, you know, the caseloads are a little higher, but I think the results are going to be a lot better. And so I always said, like, if cases are moving, I'm okay with having a lot of kids, and I messed up and said that and ended up getting like 56 kids overnight because they were like, okay, babe, you want to move them? We'll give you more. And so I think that's a step forward. Another thing that I looked at that's in, I'm trying to think about what circuit it is. It's up north. Gosh, I was just looking at them. But they had an RFP out in the beginning of the year, and I don't know why they ended up not going through with it, but that was towards parent support, basically, and how do we provide parent support groups and parent peer-to-peer mentoring programs through people who have experienced the system and who have made it through it. One of the, this is me speaking as a former youth, not as a professional, but one of the experiences that I've loved the most about the system of care is the amount of coalitions around foster youth. So I'm engaged with a lot of former foster youth all across the country that share life experiences and frustrations and how do you get through this. Just 2 weeks ago, I just fought with Florida International University with my tuition exemption waiver. And they didn't understand it and didn't understand I can get my master's with it. So I had to fight them and bring all the big dogs in. But come to find out, a lot of other former youth were going through some of the same experiences with things that weren't the traditional bachelor's program or technical college program. So I think trying to figure out how we do support groups around that. And then even one of the things that if I would stay long enough in a circuit, um, that I would like to see is case management support groups, like true case management support groups. And I know that that sounds weird when we're talking about how do we engage with families and remember social services, but sometimes we don't take enough time to talk about our own stresses on cases and how we've overcame them. And so by the time the person's talking about it, they've already applied to 15 different jobs and they're already like, no, I'm leaving this field. And if we were to truly do those case management support groups, just to let people vent, I don't want to say I'm not a good worker. I'm a better leader than I am a worker. I can lead a team a lot better than I can I like to have a larger impact. So I like to have a team feel. And so I always required meetings. When I was at One Hope in Orlando as a supervisor, in One Hope Orlando, you can sit anywhere you want. You don't have to sit with your team. It was a crazy setup from my mindset. And so I said, no, we're going to change this. So I went into a space and I basically coached everyone to better spaces around the other offices and felt like a real estate agent. And I was like, no. My worker currently has a window view, and I'd rather you go get that window view. You've been here for 2 years. I think you need a window view. And so I get them to move. And so eventually, I guess some people call it gentrification within the office, but I moved all the people that weren't in my unit outside of that space so that way I could use that space for my unit. And I did that intentionally because I wanted to pair up each of my workers together. And so it's where you're not good at, this is where you're good at. And so I also believe okay, this person is not good at doing their paperwork. This person's really good at doing their paperwork. So you know what? Both of y'all have these 2 caseloads, and you're primary on this one, and you're secondary on this one. I basically make them all primary and secondary on every case. And so I did that with each pair. And so I had 3 different pairs of people that were basically working on those cases. They didn't really realize they were working on a larger caseload, but they were being able to be effective and efficient on those things. And what I realized is they would start talking to each other more before they came to me. And so they come to me with hey, no, Vic, this is what, Michaela wants to do. And Michaela said, this is what she, and I'm like, well, it sounds like y'all made a good plan. Let's go try and do this. And so one, now my worker feels like they're not in it by themselves. And then 2, they're able to have that dialogue on a consistent basis. I've also been pretty good at morale at every job I've had. And so somehow I've always been chair of the spirit team and morale team somehow, within a month and a half, and nobody really asked me. It just, yeah, Vic, you're in charge of it. And so I would do intentional things to bring up morale. And so one of those things was, I told CHS and I was like, people get these smoke breaks, but people who don't smoke, they don't take breaks. They just keep moving. I was like, so how do we say we give these mental health breaks and these chat breaks and all this kind of great stuff? And so we intentionally started doing that in our office. And so every 2 or 3 hours, somebody was walking around saying, hey, we all need to take a break. And it started working. One, because just sitting there trying to find the answer is sometimes not the best thing to do. It's not productive. And I always say we work a lot, but how much productive time do we have? And so even my workers, if I look at them and I'm like, oh no, you don't look like you've been sleeping. How about you flex out? Because I know you probably have worked a lot. I don't even want to know what you did last night for work, but you probably need to go home. And in Orlando, I actually got made fun of because one of my workers came in at 9:30, and I was aggravated, not gonna lie to you. But he came in at 9:30 and was like, Vic, I need to go take a nap. And I said, well, why'd you come into work? You came in to tell me you need to take a nap. And the supervisors around me make fun of me for how I ran my unit because it didn't make sense to them. But I've also have never lost a worker underneath me. And I think part of it is we spend a lot of time on self-care and trauma-informed stuff, but we don't realize like how that flows into like our workers. And so those 15-minute breaks are like, don't talk about anything, but like you, like stop talking about the families, get to know like how many like children your coworker has, get to know like all of that kind of great stuff, because outside of that, like you should be networking at like where you're at. And so it gets you that connection. And sometimes I feel like that's sometimes like how I get people to say, because now they're thinking about the team and they're not just thinking about like what I've been doing by myself. And even like supervisors are good at it. We are very good at saying, we will assist you, we will do this. And like our assistance is usually, we'll answer the phone when you call to vent about what you're doing. But it's not necessarily like we're going to go out in the field. And so like I've been very intentional on like, when I say like I'm going to support you, I mean like you can call me. So that way like they know that. And then also like asking those questions on like, when I had one worker that swore I didn't, this is the one I let go home and take a nap at 9:30. He swore I wasn't supporting him. And so I said, well, what is your definition of support? I said, because maybe we've got two different definitions and I need to understand like, what's your definition? And so when he's talking about it, I said, oh yeah, I didn't do that. I said, you're exactly right. I said, I can do better at supporting you in that. I was like, but I wouldn't say I don't support you. I just don't support you the way you need me to support you right now. I was like, so I can do that. And oftentimes like, we let our own ego get to us when people say like support and all that kind of stuff, because it's a reflection of ourselves. And so I was very intentional on that kind of stuff. One hope, we got our executive director to buy us snacks. So I'm a huge believer of like comfort food. And so, every week she makes sure she got snacks up there, because one of the complaints that, I wouldn't say complaints, one of the themes I saw when sending out our Spirit of Morale survey was like, people were complaining about they don't have enough time to eat. I was like, well, don't know how to fix that besides let's just bring food here. And then like every 2 weeks we would have some morale event that was around like some measure that we're going to work towards. And so like we always had like these healthy competitions. And so I think part of like how do we do better social engagement and how do we get people who aren't comfortable doing it is figuring out like who's comfortable doing it. I had a worker in my unit that like loved going to the jail. I had one that was like deathly afraid of going to the jail. And I was like, I remember my first time at the jail, I was like, oh no, I look like I'm 18 and like I'm walking in this jail, like they might take me. And so I walked through that jail and I was like, yeah, this isn't a place for me. But like I would try to figure out those people. And even oftentimes like we miss good engagement in jail. Like really good engagement, like really good storytelling. Like you have people that just want somebody to come visit them. So they're willing to talk every time you get there. And so I did a lot of like looking at people's strengths and like matching them on that. Yeah, Jessica, reading what you just said. I think yes, I think family engagement specialist is the answer, more than specific substance abuse or domestic violence. And I think that with a little bit of bias, don't get me wrong. I think sometimes when we're treating substance abuse and domestic violence, we're not really treating the family. We're treating what's comfortable, and we know the curriculum by that point. And when we get good at like working curriculum, we're doing clockwork. We're not doing true engagement. And so when we do family engagement, like it does more. Even at Self Future, we have our line item in our budget says family support worker, but I don't tell, like I call our family support worker a family support specialist, because like he's a specialist. Like you're not just a worker here. Like you're good at what you do, and I need you to realize that like every time you do. Like I don't want you just to work like crazy. I want you to like specialize in what you're doing. And he runs that title like it's the best thing. What are some recommendations for how attorneys or guardian ad litems can contribute to the goal of family well-being? Ooh, that's a good question. I always think my caseload is large until like I look at guardian ad litems and attorneys. Well, guardian ad litem attorneys and attorneys, but attorneys specifically. I don't think we spend enough time I don't think attorneys spend enough time checking in with their parents prior to that court date. I also had an addiction to court. So I would be quick to say, no, I want a judicial review in 3 months. Not in 6 months. I need it in 2 months. Like if I saw a true like movement happening, I wanted another court date. We're going to get a status hearing. Like we're going to get me something, because like I need continued conversations as a team on like how this parent is truly doing. And sometimes like between that court date, like this parent could have been like doing so great, and then somehow like they drop off, and it's because like we're not truly having enough conversations to like encourage them. I look at the baby court system, the baby court program, and why like that works so well. I think it's because like their motto is truly social engagement. Like we're gonna have all these meetings all month long, and by the end of this month, like we're gonna have like seeing you like 10 times. It works. It moves to permanency a little faster. I would like to see the data on like what reunification numbers look like, but I do know like they're doing good at like actually like meeting permanency. And then guardian ad litems. This is where it's interesting, because guardian items are assigned to more for the child than the parents. And I've been a huge advocate of that whenever I disagree with guardian ad litems. I'm like, well, your job is to fight for the child specifically. I'm trying to look as holistic as possible. So I see a couple different things. So I may like be leaning a little bit more to, mom and dad on this one than understanding what you're saying about the child. And I've always told people like the best things have always happened when we disagree. And we fight it out. I know a lot of people like get aggravated with it, but like that's how you really like find like innovative ways to do things. One of the stories I was actually going to say under the parents part of it, I had a parent who was in the system of care. She was, I think, 21, 22. And at this time she had one of her kids was TPR'd, one of her kids was in a foster home, and then her other kid was in it was a non-judicial case because the child was hospital bound basically. And so I got in there and I was like looking at the case and I was like, oh, this isn't making any sense. Like, how can I make this work? Mom is trying. She like, I don't know how to give her more resources. And I remember like thinking about like, man, she was in the system of care. She aged out, and like just really like focusing on that part a lot. And I remember walking in. At this time, I was actually a case manager. I walked into my supervisor's office and I said, "Hey, I almost said the client's name. Jane. Jane was in foster care. She aged out. Why don't we try to get her independent living?" And the supervisor was like, "Huh, we haven't thought of that." I was like, "Yeah, like we terminated this mom, and we say like I can't see myself going to like court saying like I want to terminate the rest of her kids when she actually has access to more resources than like a typical parent in our system." I was like, "We can get her in a house. We can get her all this stuff. Like, and this is the stuff that's holding her back." I was like, "Let's do that." And so we ended up doing it, and mom ended up getting reunified. And mind you, that case was open like 2 years prior, like for 2 years prior to me like actually coming to the agency. And so everybody was like, definitely a TPR. We already TPR one. We'll TPR this one, and then if that baby leaves the hospital, we'll work on TPR in that other one. And I wasn't really, like I said, I'm not really in that mindset. So I was like, got creative and we did that. And then there was another family. Mom had 6 different kids. And this baby, when I got to, this is when I was at One Hope. When I got to One Hope, the baby was probably 7 months old at that point. So, we were already moving towards, termination of parental rights. And the last like 2 cases, like mom defaulted on the cases. So it should have been an easy, like, we go to court, mom's not going to show up, we'll default, all this kind of great stuff. And I remember like, I was like, this just doesn't make any sense. Like we don't know where mom is at all. I was like, but we know how to find her baby whenever she has these babies. I said, no, we're gonna find mom. And so they had 27 volumes of each of of all the kid of everything for that case for mom. And so I read through the whole fifth spin thing first, and then I requested all 27 volumes. And when you get stuff from whatever the mountain thing is called that everybody keeps sending their paperwork to, um, they ordered all the things to come down, and Brace was like, "What are you gonna do with all of them?" It's like, "I'm gonna read through each one of them and figure out how to find mom." And so, sure as day, I'm reading through it, and I find an email in there, and I said, "Huh, let me email and see if this is mom." And so I emailed and said, "Hey, I don't know, if you still use this email, but this is Victor Sims, and I work at One Hope, and if you have a child that was removed, I'd like you to give me a call at this number." And so this day, mom called me, and I was like, "Oh, well, we found you." I was like, "This is great." I was like, "Nobody's been able to find you." And part of it is because, when cases get passed off, once we say we haven't had engagement with mom, in case in our minds, okay, well, mom's just not trying, and we're like, they said they haven't been able to find them. This kid's been open for a year, so how am I going to be able to find him? I've never seen her. And so I remember I forgot to tell the attorney prior to court that I had found mom, and at this point, I had called each of the providers because this was going to be my first TPR. And so I was like, "Oh no, I have never had a TPR, and I'm not going to start that today." And so I called mom, and I called each one of the providers. I sent that referral. I said, "I know you want to wait for funding. I will figure out when funding is going to go through. Embrace will pay you. So I need you to figure this out, and while I figure out how to get Embrace to approve this real quickly." And so mind you, mom had started doing all these services. So mom comes to court, and mom is like, "Oh yeah, I've been doing this, and this, and I did my psychological evaluation with the IQ component. Yeah, I did that 2 weeks ago." And the attorney's like, "Vic, why didn't you tell me before we came here?" I was like, "Well, because you never know what's gonna happen." I was like, I wasn't really worried about it. I was so focused on mom that I was proud of what's going on. And the judge was surprised too, because the judge was like, "I only see her whenever we remove the kids." I was like, "Oh no." I was like, that wasn't gonna happen. And so I think sometimes digging a little further than we want to really dig. And so having a family engagement specialist, but that being their job, I think they could do more. I look at some of the roles that we have within our programs, and I'm like, I wouldn't spend 40 hours every week for somebody to be a family finder. I just can't see it in my head. I think we can use that role to go beyond family finding. And I think we can say, I need you to engage families. And so I don't need you just to find them. I need you to get them engaged with our system. Because a lot of the family finders, almost most of the ones that I've engaged with, a lot of the roles are just, we'll mail out the letters, but the case manager needs to go knock on that door if something comes back. And I'm like, well, the case manager, if they could do it, we wouldn't have your role actually, because we can mail out the letter. And so I remember whenever we first, I'm a nerd, so I take all these random trainings for no reason. And so I took the family finding training, and I was looking at some of the stuff, and then I looked at how One Hope did, and I was like, "Oh, why are people doing it this way?" I was like, you can just auto-populate it to each form. I was like, why would you want to type each one of these or copy and paste on each one, and you can just auto-populate it for the whole document, and then you got mom's name, social security number, most recent address, and it populates for all the places you're going to mail it to. And wow, streamline it, what an idea. And I was like, oh no, I was I don't like to work like that, y'all. And so we did that, and then the letters were coming back, and I was like, okay, this is great. And then when he told me I need to go knock on the door, I was like, no, I thought that was your job. And it was an eye-opening moment. And I was like, well, I thought you were the one to find the family. If in that case, you can have an administrative secretary mail out letters to people. And so I think looking at some of the positions we already have internally and figuring out how do we use them a little better. Permanency specialists. What does it look like when it comes to okay, I keep telling this case manager to file the status with the court to close this case. You know what? Let me just go ahead and send the status myself, so that way we make sure we get this case closed PG, or we get this case closed this, and we get so wrapped into that spot. I tell people I live most of my job in the additional duties as assigned. And I think all of us do that. But some of those duties don't come from a supervisor or a program director or a program manager. Some of those duties come from that parent. Some of those duties come from that child. Some duties come from the caregiver. And I think when we realize like living in that like additional duty that's assigned is like sometimes like the greatest thing. So I personally want to see more family engagement specialists across the state. I want to see the state get a little bit better on that. I know one of the conversations nationally that's going on because of the Family First Prevention Act is geared towards how do we bring innovation still back? Because when we got rid of the Title IV waiver, we also got rid of innovation in child welfare in a huge sense. And I think we still need to like always have funds for that because if we don't, we're gonna get wrapped into like doing paperwork again. And I mean, diversion came from Florida. QPI came from like because of like the Title IV waiver, we've been able to like use money in places like that we typically weren't able to use because of like how social work was funded, and that's like the Social Security Act. Yeah.